$5. That was all they decided she was worth tonight. The soft buzz of conversation filled the small diner, plates clinking, neon lights flickering against rain-streaked windows. But at table 12, everything felt louder, sharper, crueler. Lily Harper sat stiffly in the cracked vinyl booth, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her worn Maid uniform still faintly smelling of lemon cleaner, the fabric pressed as carefully as she could manage after a 10-hour shift. Across from her, the man she had agreed to meet leaned back with a smirk, spinning a crumpled $5 bill between his fingers like it was a joke only he understood. "So this covers your time, right?" he said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, his friends at the counter snickering as one of them subtly angled a phone, recording. Lily blinked once, slowly, her chest tightening, but her face stayed composed. She had almost canceled this date. She should have. But when your rent is 3 days late and your little brother texts asking if there's enough for groceries, you say yes to things you don't believe in anymore. The waitress passed by, giving Lily a quick, sympathetic glance, and Lily offered a small smile in return, like she was the one reassuring everyone else. "You don't have to stay," the man continued, tossing the bill onto the table now, letting it slide toward her. I figured, Maid, cheap date, makes sense, right?" Laughter rippled again. The neon sign outside buzzed louder, casting a pale red glow across Lily's face, catching the faint tremble in her fingers before she stilled them. She could feel every eye in the room without looking up. For a second, just a second, something inside her threatened to crack. Then she inhaled. Slow, steady. Across the diner, near the window, a man in a simple dark jacket watched quietly, his expression unreadable, his coffee untouched. Ethan Caldwell had walked in 10 minutes ago, unnoticed, unrecognized, choosing the corner seat on purpose. He had seen scenes like this before. People revealing who they were when they thought it didn't matter, but something about this one held him still. He had almost stood up the moment the bill hit the table. Almost. But he didn't. Not yet. Because he wanted to see her choice. Lily reached forward, not for the $5, but for her small purse. She pulled out a few worn bills of her own, carefully counting them, placing them beside the untouched food. "This should cover my part," she said softly, her voice calm, clear enough to cut through the noise without rising above it. The man scoffed, leaning forward. "Seriously? You're still pretending you've got dignity?" Lily finally looked at him, her eyes steady, not angry, not pleading, just certain. "I clean floors," she said, her voice even, "but I don't lower myself." The laughter died faster than it started. Even the phone at the counter lowered slightly. For a moment, silence stretched across the diner, heavy and unexpected. Ethan's grip tightened slightly around his cup, something flickering in his gaze. Respect, sharp and immediate. Lily stood, smoothing her uniform like it was something far more elegant, far more expensive. She nodded politely to the waitress on her way out, even leaving a small tip with the little she had left, and stepped into the cold night air without looking back. The door shut behind her with a soft chime. Inside, the man at table 12 scoffed again, trying to recover the moment. But it was already gone. And at the corner table, Ethan Caldwell slowly stood up, his eyes still on the door she had just walked through, something in his world quietly shifting in a way no boardroom deal ever had. The night air hit colder than Lily expected, sharp against her cheeks as she stepped onto the sidewalk, the faint hum of traffic and distant sirens filling the silence she carried with her. She wrapped her arms around herself, not because she was cold, but because something inside her still needed holding together. The diner's neon glow faded behind her as she walked, her shoes tapping softly against the wet pavement, each step steady, deliberate, like she was refusing to let the weight of what just happened slow her down. In her pocket, her fingers brushed against the few dollars she had left, thinner now, lighter, but still hers. That mattered. A passing car splashed through a shallow puddle nearby, and she paused briefly under a flickering street lamp, exhaling slowly. "You are fine," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the night. "You are still fine." She had said those words before. After her mother's hospital bills swallowed everything they had. After the landlord posted the late notice on their door. After the first time someone looked at her uniform and decided they knew her entire worth. Each time, she had kept moving. And she would again. A few blocks away, Tucked between a laundromat and a closed convenience store, the small apartment she shared with her younger brother waited for her, its single dim light probably still on. He always left it on when she worked late, like it could guide her home. Behind her, the diner door opened again, and for a moment, she thought someone might call her back. No one did. Instead, footsteps followed at a distance, measured, unhurried. Ethan Caldwell stepped onto the same sidewalk, the cool air brushing against his face as his eyes found her figure beneath the street lamp. He did not call out. Not yet. He simply watched as she adjusted her shoulders and kept walking, her posture still upright, her pace unbroken. There was no anger in her movements, no bitterness spilling over into careless steps, just quiet strength. He had built companies worth billions, negotiated deals across continents, seen people perform kindness when cameras were on and discard it the moment they were not. But this was different. There had been no audience she was trying to impress when she left that table. No advantage to gain, only dignity to protect. He slipped his hands into his coat pockets, following at a respectful distance, his mind replaying her words over and over. I clean floors, but I do not lower myself. The sentence echoed louder than any boardroom applause he had ever received. Lily turned a corner, the street growing quieter, the buildings older, paint chipped, windows dim. She slowed slightly as she reached a small apartment complex, its entrance light buzzing faintly above the door. She hesitated for a second before stepping inside, disappearing from view. Ethan stopped across the street, his gaze fixed on the door long after it closed behind her. He could walk away. He probably should. This was not his world. Not anymore. But something in his chest refused to let the moment end there. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, glancing briefly at the screen before dialing. I need a full report, he said quietly when the call connected, his voice calm, controlled. Employee records. Night shift cleaning staff. All properties. There was a pause on the other end, confusion, then acknowledgement. Ethan ended the call without another word, slipping the phone back into his pocket. His eyes returned to the apartment door, his expression unreadable, but his decision already made. He had not stepped in tonight. He had chosen to watch, to learn. But tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, the world that had dismissed her with $5 would begin to realize exactly who had been sitting in that diner all along. And more importantly, who she truly was. Morning came too quickly, pale sunlight slipping through the thin curtains of Lily's apartment, landing softly on the worn wooden floor where her shoes were still neatly placed by the door. The space was small, barely enough for two people, but everything inside it was organized with quiet care, like every inch had a purpose. In the corner, a second-hand couch doubled as her younger brother's bed, a thin blanket pulled up to his shoulders as he slept, his breathing slow and steady. Lily stood in the tiny kitchen, pouring the last of the coffee into a chipped mug, her eyes distant but focused, already preparing herself for another long day. The events from the night before lingered somewhere in the back of her mind, not loud, not overwhelming, just present like a faint bruise she refused to press. She glanced at the clock. 6:30 in the morning. Her shift started in 30 minutes. She did not have time to feel sorry for herself. She reached into her pocket, pulling out the remaining cash, smoothing the bills against the counter before setting aside just enough for groceries later. Everything else would go toward rent. It always did. You are up early again, a sleepy voice mumbled. From the couch, Lily turned, her expression softening instantly as her brother pushed himself up, rubbing his eyes. I have to be, she said gently, walking over to him. You have school in an hour. I made you oatmeal. He nodded, still half asleep, but he smiled, and that was enough. That was always enough. Across the city, in a glass building that stretched toward the sky, Ethan Caldwell stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office. The skyline spread out beneath him like something he owned but no longer cared to look at. His desk behind him was already covered with neatly arranged files, a tablet glowing softly with information pulled overnight. Employee records. Night shift cleaning staff. Multiple locations. Names blurred together until one line stopped him. Lily Harper. He tapped the screen once, pulling up her profile. Part-time maid. Multiple shifts. No complaints. No disciplinary records. Attendance nearly perfect. He read it twice, then once more, as if the simplicity of it held something deeper than numbers and schedules. There was a knock at the door, and his assistant stepped in carefully. "Your 9 o'clock meeting is ready," she said, placing another folder on his desk. Ethan did not turn. "Reschedule it," he replied calmly. She hesitated, clearly surprised. "It is with the board." "Reschedule it," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for discussion. She nodded quickly and stepped back out. Ethan picked up his coat, his movements deliberate, his expression focused in a way that had nothing to do with profit or expansion. Back at the apartment complex, Lily stepped out into the morning light, her uniform freshly pressed, her hair neatly tied back, her posture as composed as it had been the night before. She locked the door behind her and headed down the street, unaware that across the city, a man who could change her entire future had already begun to move in her direction. The bus arrived with a soft hiss, and she climbed aboard, dropping her exact change into the slot, taking a seat by the window. As the city passed by in blurred motion, she looked out quietly, her reflection faint in the glass, steady, unbroken. She did not know that today was not going to be like every other day, and she definitely did not know that somewhere between the floors she cleaned and the life she was trying to hold together, someone had finally seen her for exactly who she was. The cleaning cart wheels squeaked softly as Lily pushed it down the polished hallway, the scent of disinfectant lingering in the air, mixing with the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. The building was different from the others she worked in, taller, quieter, the kind of place where every surface reflected perfection and every step echoed just a little too loudly. She adjusted her grip on the handle, steadying it as she stopped outside a set of glass doors marked with a small, silver plaque. Executive floor. She hesitated for a second, glancing down at her checklist, then back at the doors. She had been assigned here only twice before, and both times she had been told to move quickly and stay invisible. Lily pushed the door open carefully, her reflection briefly catching in the glass before disappearing as she stepped inside. The office beyond was wide, open, filled with soft natural light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretching endlessly beyond them. Everything was immaculate, but not untouched. There were signs of presence here. A coffee cup placed neatly on a desk, a chair slightly turned, a jacket draped casually over the back of another chair. Someone important worked here. She lowered her eyes, focusing on her task, guiding the cart toward the nearest desk, her movements efficient, practiced. Across the room, a door clicked open quietly. Ethan stepped out, his gaze immediately landing on her. For a moment, neither of them moved. He had arrived minutes earlier, timing it carefully, knowing exactly when the cleaning crew would begin their rounds. He had told himself it was to confirm what he had already read in reports. To observe, to be certain. But standing there now, watching her move with quiet precision, her attention fully on her work, it felt like something else entirely. Lily did not notice him at first. She wiped down the surface in front of her, adjusting a stack of papers just enough to clean beneath them without disturbing their order, her fingers careful, respectful, like she understood that even small things mattered in places like this. Then she felt it, that subtle shift in the air when someone is watching. She looked up, her eyes meeting his across the room. For a brief second, recognition did not come. He was dressed differently now. Tailored suit, crisp lines. Nothing like the man in the dark jacket sitting quietly in the corner of the diner. But there was something familiar in his eyes. Something steady. Lily straightened slightly, her hands stilling on the cloth she held. "I am sorry," she said quickly, her voice calm but cautious. "I can come back later if this is not a good time." Ethan shook his head once, taking a step forward. "No," he replied, his tone even. "You can continue." His voice carried a quiet authority, not loud, not forced, but undeniable. Lily nodded, lowering her gaze again, returning to her work, though now she was aware of every movement, every sound. Ethan walked slowly through the space, his steps measured, his eyes taking in details he had never noticed before. Not the design, not the furniture, but her. The way she worked without cutting corners. The way she handled everything with care, even when no one was watching. Especially when no one was watching. He stopped near the window, looking out briefly before turning back to her. "You work nights too," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. Lily paused, glancing up again, surprised. "Yes," she answered. "Most nights." Ethan nodded slightly, as if confirming something only he understood. There was a moment of silence, quiet but not uncomfortable, stretching between them. Then Lily picked up the small trash bin beside the desk, emptying it into her cart before placing it back exactly where it had been. Precise. Intentional. Ethan watched closely, his mind returning to the diner, to the $5 bill, to the words she had spoken without hesitation. He could have revealed everything right then, could have ended the distance between who he was and who she believed him to be. But he did not. Not yet. Because what mattered now was not who he was. It was who she had already shown herself to be. And for the first time in a long time, that was more than enough to make him wait. The quiet hum of the executive floor continued as Lily moved from one desk to another, her routine steady, controlled, but her awareness sharpened by the man who had not left. She could feel his presence without needing to look again, like a subtle pressure in the air that refused to fade. Most executives barely acknowledged her existence, their eyes passing over her like she was part of the furniture, but he was different. He was watching, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that made her careful. That alone was enough to unsettle her rhythm just slightly. She adjusted the cleaning cloth in her hand, smoothing it out before continuing, her movements precise, deliberate, as if every action carried weight. Across the room, Ethan remained near the window, his posture relaxed but his attention fixed. He noticed the details others ignored. The way she aligned objects exactly as she found them, not an inch out of place. The way she checked each surface twice, once for cleaning, once for presentation. There was pride in it. Not loud, not spoken, but undeniable. "What is your name?" he asked suddenly, his voice breaking the silence with calm clarity. Lily paused mid-motion, her hand hovering over the edge of a desk before she lowered it slowly. She turned to face him, her expression composed but guarded. "Lily," she replied. "Lily Harper." Ethan nodded once, as if committing it to memory even though he already had. "How long have you been working here, Lily?" He continued, his tone conversational, almost casual, but there was intent beneath it. Lily hesitated for a brief moment, then answered honestly. "Almost 2 years." Ethan glanced around the office again, then back at her. "And you have always worked this floor?" Lily shook her head slightly. "No, only when they need extra help." There was no complaint in her voice, no hint of resentment, just fact. Ethan studied her for a second longer, then took a few steps closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "You take your work seriously," he said. It was not a question. Lily's fingers tightened slightly around the cloth before she relaxed them again. "It is my job," she said simply. Ethan held her gaze for a moment, then spoke again, quieter this time. "Not everyone treats it that way." Lily allowed herself the smallest breath of a smile, not amused, not proud, just aware. "Not everyone needs to," she replied. "But I do." The words settled between them, heavier than their simplicity suggested. Ethan nodded slowly, understanding more than she intended to reveal. There it was again, that quiet strength, that refusal to let circumstance define effort. He had seen employees with degrees from top universities do less with more. And here she was, giving everything to something most people overlooked. A faint sound echoed from the hallway outside, distant voices approaching, breaking the stillness of the moment. Lily glanced toward the door, instinctively stepping back toward her cart, ready to move on to the next area. "I should finish before the offices fill up," she said, her tone returning to professional distance. Ethan stepped aside slightly, giving her space, but his eyes did not leave her. "Lily," he said again, stopping her just before she turned away. She looked back, waiting. There was a brief pause, a flicker of something unspoken passing through his expression before it settled back into calm control. "Do not change the way you work," he said. Lily blinked once, caught off guard by the comment. It was not something she expected to hear in a place like this. She nodded slowly. "I was not planning to," she replied. And then she turned, pushing her cart toward the next section of the floor, her steps steady once more. Ethan watched her go, his decision becoming clearer with every passing second. He had come here to observe, to confirm. But now, he was beginning to understand that what he had found was not something that could simply be noted and left behind. This was not about curiosity anymore. This was about recognition. And very soon, the world she quietly worked within was going to shift in a way she could not yet imagine. By the time Lily finished the executive floor, the building had begun to fill with quiet footsteps. Polished shoes crossing marble floors, low conversations replacing the early morning silence. She pushed her cart toward the service hallway, her pace unchanged, her expression calm, but her thoughts were not as still as she wanted them to be. The man's voice lingered. His words, "Do not change the way you work." It was such a simple sentence, but it stayed with her longer than it should have. People did not usually notice how she worked. They noticed when something was wrong. They noticed when something was missing. But not this. Never this. She reached the utility room and parked her cart neatly against the wall, organizing the supplies with the same care she had shown on the floor. Bottles aligned. Cloths folded. Nothing out of place. Routine grounded her. It always had. Outside, the day continued to move, fast and indifferent, but inside that small room, everything slowed just enough for her to breathe. Meanwhile, on the upper level, Ethan stood in the conference room, surrounded by a group of executives who spoke in confident tones about numbers, projections, and expansion plans. Charts glowed on the large screen. Voices overlapped. But Ethan was not listening. Not really. His gaze drifted briefly toward the glass wall, as if he could still see the hallway where she had just been. "We expect a 12% increase this quarter," one of the board members said, tapping the table lightly for emphasis. Ethan nodded once, his expression neutral, but his mind elsewhere. 12% meant nothing in that moment, not compared to what he had seen that morning. "We should also consider restructuring the maintenance contracts," another voice added. "Costs could be reduced significantly." That word again. Costs. Ethan's eyes sharpened slightly, his attention returning fully now. "Reduced how?" he asked calmly. The room quieted. The speaker cleared his throat. "Outsourcing more of the cleaning staff. Lower wages. Fewer benefits. Standard approach." Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair, his fingers resting lightly against the table. For a brief second, the image of Lily standing in that office, working with quiet precision, flashed through his mind. Not complaining, not cutting corners, just doing her job with a level of care most people in this room could not replicate. "No," Ethan said, his voice firm but not raised. The single word cut through the discussion instantly. The board members exchanged quick glances, surprised. "We are not reducing standards to save money," he continued, his tone steady, controlled. "Not in this company." There was a pause. No one argued. They rarely did when he spoke like that. The meeting moved on, but the direction had shifted, subtle but undeniable. Downstairs, Lily stepped back into the hallway, her next assignment waiting, her mind already focused on the tasks ahead. She did not know that a conversation happening floors above her had just quietly protected the very work she depended on. She did not know that her presence, her effort, had already influenced decisions far beyond her reach. She only knew that there was more to do, more floors to clean, more hours to get through before she could go home. As she moved down the corridor, adjusting her grip on the cart, her reflection briefly caught in a glass panel beside her. She paused for just a fraction of a second, looking at herself. The same uniform, the same tired eyes, but something felt different. Not bigger, not dramatic, just steadier, like a small shift she could not explain. Upstairs, Ethan stood by the window again after the meeting ended, the city stretching out beneath him, but his focus was no longer on the skyline. It was on a decision that had already begun to take shape. Observing was no longer enough. Waiting was no longer necessary. The moment to act was coming closer, and when it did, it would not be quiet. Not for her. Not for anyone who had ever decided her worth could be measured in something as small as $5. The afternoon settled into a steady rhythm, the building now fully alive with movement, voices echoing through hallways, elevator doors opening and closing with quiet precision, the kind of controlled chaos that defined places where decisions carried weight. Lily moved through it all without disrupting a single thing, her presence blending into the background as she continued her work. But today, something was different. Not in the way people looked at her. That had not changed. Most still passed by without a second glance. But there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere around her, something she could not quite explain, like the air had become just a little more aware of her presence. She pushed her cart into another section of the building, stopping just outside a large conference room, where voices carried more clearly than usual. The door was slightly open, just enough for sound to slip through. "We need efficiency," a sharp voice said from inside. "We cannot afford to keep employees who do not contribute beyond basic tasks." Lily froze for a fraction of a second, her hand tightening slightly on the card handle. She knew that tone. She had heard it before. Not directed at her, not directly, but close enough to recognize what it meant. Replaceable. Disposable. She lowered her gaze, stepping quietly past the door, choosing not to linger, choosing not to listen any further. There was no benefit in hearing words that did not change her reality. Inside the room, Ethan sat at the head of the table, his expression calm, but his eyes focused, sharper now than they had been earlier. The man speaking continued, unaware of how quickly the tone of the meeting had shifted. "We can outsource more. Cut hours. Reduce overhead. It is a standard move." Ethan leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the table, his voice cutting in with quiet authority. "And what exactly do you think keeps this company running?" The question was simple, but it landed with weight. The room stilled. The man hesitated, then answered carefully. "Operations. Strategy. Leadership." Ethan held his gaze for a moment, then spoke again, slower this time. "No. People do." Silence followed. No one moved. No one spoke. Ethan continued, his voice steady, but there was something underneath it now, something personal. "Every role in this building exists for a reason. If you cannot see the value in that, then you are not looking closely enough." Outside, Lily had already moved on, unaware that her quiet presence had once again shaped the direction of a conversation she was never meant to be part of. She entered another office, beginning her work without hesitation, her routine grounding her, as always. But as she wiped down the desk in front of her, she noticed something unusual. A small card, placed neatly at the corner of the surface, different from the usual clutter she cleaned around. She paused, glancing at it briefly before picking it up carefully. There was a name printed on it. Ethan Caldwell. The letters were clean, bold, unmistakable. Her fingers stilled for just a second, her mind connecting something she had not fully processed before. The man from earlier. The voice. The presence. She looked back toward the hallway instinctively, her heart giving a small, unexpected shift. Upstairs, Ethan stood just outside the conference room now. The meeting concluded, his decision no longer forming but set. The timing was no longer a question. The distance between who he was and what she believed was about to close. And when it did, everything she thought she understood about this place, about him, about herself, would begin to change in ways neither of them could turn back from. The card felt heavier than it should have in Lily's hand, the clean white surface and bold black letters standing in sharp contrast to everything else in the room. Ethan Caldwell. The name echoed in her mind, quiet at first, then louder as pieces began to fall into place. The building, the authority in his voice, the way everyone seemed to move around him without question. Her fingers tightened slightly around the card before she placed it back exactly where she had found it, aligning it carefully with the edge of the desk as if nothing had been disturbed. But something had. Inside her, a realization was beginning to take shape, slow but undeniable. The man from the diner. The one who had watched. The one who had said nothing. The same man standing here, speaking like he owned every floor above her. Because he did. Lily stepped back from the desk, her movements controlled, but her thoughts no longer steady. She reached for her card, gripping the handle a little tighter than before, grounding herself in something familiar. Work. Routine. That was what she understood. Not this. Not him. Not whatever this was becoming. The hallway outside felt different as she stepped into it again. Louder somehow, sharper, like the world had shifted just slightly off balance. At the far end, footsteps approached, measured and unhurried. Lily looked up, and there he was. This time, there was no distance, no glass walls, no uncertainty. Ethan walked toward her with the same calm presence, his suit immaculate, his expression composed, but there was no mistaking it now. He stopped a few feet away, close enough for conversation, far enough to respect the boundaries she had not asked for but clearly held. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them carried everything that had not been said before. Lily broke it first, her voice steady but quieter than usual. "You are him," she said. It was not a question. Ethan nodded once. No hesitation, no attempt to deny it. "Yes," he replied simply. The words settled heavily between them. Lily exhaled slowly, her eyes searching his face, not for confirmation anymore, but for understanding. You were there, she continued. At the diner. Another nod. Still calm. Still direct. I was. There was no apology in his tone. No excuse. Just truth. Lily looked away briefly, her gaze dropping to the floor before lifting again, her composure returning piece by piece. You watched, she said. This time, there was a faint edge in her voice, not anger, but something close to it. Ethan did not step back from it. I did, he answered. Silence followed, stretching longer now, heavier. Lily's grip on the cart tightened again, her mind moving faster than her expression showed. Why? She asked finally. The question was simple, but it carried everything behind it. Ethan held her gaze, his answer measured, deliberate. Because I wanted to see who you were when it mattered, he said. Lily blinked once, the words landing deeper than she expected. She let out a small breath, almost a quiet laugh, but without humor. And, she asked. Ethan did not hesitate this time. You did not disappoint. The response was calm, but it carried weight. Not praise, not flattery, recognition, real, undeniable. Lily looked at him for a long moment, her thoughts shifting, recalibrating, trying to understand where this left her. The man who had said nothing when she was humiliated now stood in front of her as someone who could change everything about her life. But he had not intervened then, and that mattered. I did not need anyone to step in, she said quietly, more to herself than to him. Ethan nodded slightly. I know, he replied, and for the first time, there was something softer in his voice. That is exactly why I am here now. Lily held his gaze, her heart steadying again, her footing returning beneath her. Whatever this was, whatever came next, it was no longer about what happened in that diner. It was about what he chose to do now, and more importantly, what she would allow. Lily stood still for a moment longer, her eyes steady on Ethan, the noise of the hallway fading into something distant, almost irrelevant. Everything about this moment felt precise, like a line had been drawn and both of them had stepped exactly where they were meant to. She exhaled slowly, her grip on the cart loosening just enough to show that she was no longer bracing herself. So what happens now? She asked, her voice calm, not demanding, not hopeful, just clear. Ethan studied her for a second, as if measuring not her circumstances, but her resolve. That depends on you, he said. Lily tilted her head slightly, her expression thoughtful. On me. Ethan nodded once. I can open doors, he continued, his tone steady, but I will not decide which ones you walk through. There was no pressure in his words, no assumption, just a quiet offer. Lily glanced down briefly, her mind moving through everything she knew, everything she did not, everything she had built with nothing but consistency and quiet endurance. She thought about the long nights, the early mornings, the careful counting of every dollar, the way she had learned to carry herself when no one else saw her worth. And then she looked back at him. I am not looking for someone to fix my life, she said. Ethan's expression did not change, but there was a faint shift in his eyes, something that looked almost like respect deepening. I know, he replied. Lily nodded slowly, as if confirming something to herself more than to him. But I am willing to grow it, she added. The words settled between them with quiet certainty. Ethan took a small step closer, not enough to close the space entirely, but enough to show that this was no longer a distant conversation. Then let me offer you something different, he said. Not a rescue. An opportunity. Lily did not interrupt. She simply listened. There is a management training program, Ethan continued. Internal. Selective. It prepares people to lead operations across multiple properties. It is not easy. It is not guaranteed. But it is earned. Lily's eyes flickered slightly, the first sign of something deeper than calm composure. Not doubt. Consideration. Why me? She asked. Ethan answered without hesitation. Because you already lead in a place where no one is watching, he said. That matters more than any resume. Silence followed, but this time it was not heavy. It was full. Lily let the words sit with her, turning them over carefully, not rushing, not reacting. Finally, she gave a small nod. If I do this, she said, her voice steady again, it will be because I earned it, not because of you. Ethan nodded immediately. That is the only way I would accept it, he replied. For the first time, a faint smile touched Lily's lips, small but real, not forced, not cautious. just present. She adjusted her grip on the cart one last time before stepping past him, her movement smooth, intentional, like she had already made her decision without needing to say it out loud. Then I guess I have work to do, she said. Ethan turned slightly, watching her walk down the hallway, her posture unchanged, her pace steady, but something about her presence now carried a different weight. Not because of what he had offered, but because she had chosen how to receive it. As she disappeared around the corner, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, something he had kept since the night at the diner. The $5 bill, now flattened, no longer crumpled. He looked at it for a moment, then folded it carefully and placed it back, not as a reminder of what she had been given, but as a marker of what she had refused to become. And somewhere between the floor she had cleaned and the future she was beginning to step toward, Lily Harper was no longer invisible. She had never been. It had just taken the right moment for the world to finally catch up.